Okay, so let's keep going here with the beginning of part 3. Montag stood looking in now at this queer house, made strange by the hour of the night, by murmuring neighbor voices, by littered glass, and there on the floor, their covers torn off and spilled out like swan feathers, the incredible books that looked so silly and really not worth bothering with, for these were nothing but black type and yellow paper and raveled binding. Mildred, of course. She must have watched him hide the books in the garden and brought them back in. Mildred. I want you to do this job all by your lonesome, Montag. Not with kerosene and a match, but piecework with a flamethrower. Your house, your cleanup. Okay, so we see that Montag here has indeed been betrayed by his wife. So he had hidden the books in the garden, but Mildred brings them back in the house. So she is part of the reason that the firemen now know that he's been harboring books. So again, we see their superficial relationship. She turns him in. She's the one who, in part, rats him out here. And then Beatty tells Montag that he wants him to do this job all by himself, right? With a flamethrower, piece by piece. It's almost like he's a dog who's peed on the floor and now Beatty's rubbing his face in it, right? He wants Montag to do this and to suffer the full consequences of it. And again, Beatty's using this to make an example. Remember, this is a spectacle. Others are watching. Beatty's using Montag's punishment to keep other people in line. Montag, can't you run? Get away. So this is Faber speaking in his ear. No, cried Montag helplessly. The hound, because of the hound. Faber heard, and Beatty, thinking it was meant for him, heard. Yes, the hound's somewhere about the neighborhood, so don't try anything. Ready? Ready. Montag snapped the safety catch on the flamethrower. Fire! A great, nuzzling gout of flame leapt out to lap at the books and knock them against the wall. He stepped into the bedroom and fired twice, and the twin beds went up in a great simmering whisper, with more heat and passion and light than he would have supposed them to contain. He burnt the bedroom walls and the cosmetic chests because he wanted to change everything. The chairs, the tables, and in the dining room, the silverware and plastic dishes, everything that showed that he had lived here in this empty house with a strange woman who would forget him tomorrow, who had gone and quite forgotten him already, listening to her seashell radio pour in on her and in on her as she rode across town alone. And as before, it was good to burn. He felt himself gush out in the fire, snatch, rend, rip in half with flame, and put away the senseless problem. There was no solution? Well, then now there was no problem either. Fire was best for everything. The books, Montag. The books leapt and danced like roasted birds, their wings ablaze with red and yellow feathers. And then he came to the parlor, where the great idiot monsters lay asleep with their white thoughts and their snowy dreams, and he shot a bolt at each of the 3 blank walls, and the vacuum hissed out at him. The emptiness made an even emptier whistle, a senseless scream. He tried to think about the vacuum upon which the nothingness had performed, but he could not. He held his breath so the vacuum could not get into his lungs. He cut off its terrible emptiness, drew back, and gave the entire room a gift of one huge, bright yellow flower of burning. The fireproof plastic sheath on everything was cut wide, and the house began to shudder with flame. When you're quite finished, said Beatty behind him, you're under arrest. So Montag goes through piece by piece and burns his house. And it's interesting, his reaction. It's almost like he's transported back to the beginning of the novel, right? He says that as before, it was good to burn. He felt himself gush out in the fire, snatch, rend, rip in half with flame, and put away the senseless problem. Fire was best for everything. So like earlier in the novel, we see that, again, he feels the sense that it is a pleasure to burn. He is taking pleasure in destroying this old life. He takes a sort of pleasure in destroying his old life. Partly because he knows that this old life was bad for him. It was a false reality, right? And so he enjoys specifically destroying the bedroom and the 2 twin beds that went up in a great simmering whisper with more heat and passion and light than he would have supposed them to contain. So again, we see here twin beds. Montag and Mildred didn't even sleep in the same bed together. They really did not have any sort of intimacy, any sort of close relationship. And so the fire that he shoots at these beds has more passion and light than their relationship ever did. So it's good for him. He feels this joy in burning what was so empty and what was so lifeless for them together. And then a similar passage where we can tell he really enjoys burning is when he comes to the parlor walls. He calls them the great idiot monsters. This is an awesome metaphor that he's using here. So we remember back when Montag has Mildred and her friends come over, and how they're nothing but noise and chaos and confusion with the bashing clowns and the colorful fish and the racing rocket cars and the senseless plots. It's just idiot monsters, and he enjoys shooting a bolt at each of their 3 blank walls, right? He enjoys destroying what has gotten in the way of his relationship with his wife. He enjoys ridding himself of everything bad in his past life. The beds that show the loveless relationship he was in, the parlor walls that were nothing but constant distraction to him. And he also burns the books. And this reminds us too of Montag at the very beginning. Because Bradbury, similar to before, compares these books in this simile here to roasted birds with their wings ablaze. And again, we're reminded of the allusion at the beginning of part 3 to Icarus. Books are like birds because books bring freedom. And in destroying these books, Montag is destroying his freedom. And this connects directly to what Beatty says as soon as he finishes the job. You're under arrest. No freedom here for Montag. The house fell in red coals and black ash. It bedded itself down in sleepy pink-gray cinders, and smoke plume blew over it, rising and waving slowly back and forth in the sky. It was 3:30 in the morning. The crowd drew back into the house. The great tents of the circus had slumped into charcoal and rubble, and the show was well over. So again, we see Bradbury comparing the burning of the house to a show that these people had been watching, to a circus. And the spectacle is over, right? It's all done now. The house is burnt. They're all going to go back into their homes, and Montag is now going to be under arrest. Montag stood with the flamethrower in his limp hands, great islands of perspiration drenching his armpits, his face smeared with soot. The other firemen waited behind him in the darkness, their faces illuminated faintly by the smoldering foundation. Montag started to speak twice, and then finally managed to put his thought together. Was it my wife? Turned in the alarm. Beatty nodded. Ugh, again, we see Mildred turned him in, ratted him out. Awful relationship. But her friends turned in an alarm earlier. That I let ride. One way or the other, you'd have got it. It was pretty silly, quoting poetry around free and easy like that. It was the act of a silly damn snob. Give a man a few lines of verse and he thinks he's the lord of all creation. You think you can walk on water with your books? Huh. The world can get by just fine without them. Look where they got you, in slime up to your lip. If I stirred the slime with my little finger, you'll drown. So we find out that there was also an alarm turned in by Mildred's friends. Remember Mrs. Phelps and Mrs. Bowles. Because Montague had pulled out a book of poetry. In particular, he had read them the poem Dover Beach, to which these women all respond with intense anger and sadness because it stirs emotions in them. This is part of why we read books. They make us feel things, and this is part of why they don't want to read books. They don't want to feel deep emotions. They want everything to be easy and light and simple and instant, and books really are not that, as you guys have probably noticed, struggling through Fahrenheit here. So we also see this illusion here. Let's switch to a color that's going to show up a little better. This illusion here, he says, you think you can walk on water with your books. Beatty is alluding here to Jesus from the Bible and how he proved his divinity by walking on water. So this thing about walking on water is basically Beatty saying, you think because you're reading books, now you're divine, you're something special. But the fact that Beatty's saying this again shows us what an interesting character he is. Because obviously he has read, he must have read in order to know these things, in order to recognize that Montague is quoting poetry and that he's got this specific reference here to the Bible. But yet, he says that books do nothing but get you into the slime, right? So Beatty thinks books just cause problems. He's read, but he hasn't been satisfied. He hasn't been, his thirst hasn't been quenched. His questions haven't been answered. And so to him, he just sees books as continuing the confusion and the frustration, which is part of the reason why he perpetuates the society. Montague could not move. A great earthquake had come with fire and leveled the house, and Mildred was under there somewhere, and his entire life under there, and he could not move. The earthquake was still shaking and falling and shivering inside him, and he stood there, his knees half bent under the great load of tiredness and bewilderment and outrage, letting Beatty hit him without raising a hand. So this is a metaphor here. There wasn't actually a earthquake. This is just how Montague is feeling. He feels like his entire life has been leveled, destroyed to nothing but rubble, which largely it has. Montague, you idiot. Montague, you damn fool. Why did you really do it? Montague did not hear. He was far away. He was running with his mind. He was gone, leaving his dead, soot-covered body to sway in front of another raving fool. It's very interesting here. Montague's past life is now gone. His past has been destroyed, obliterated. It's like an earthquake has leveled it. And what is left is someone else. In this way, he's now new, right? He's far away from all this. He's running with his mind. He's leaving his dead, soot-covered body to sway. Montague here is like the phoenix. He's like this mythical bird that is reborn from the ashes. So in mythology, the phoenix was this special bird that when it got old would burst into flames. And from the ashes of its burnt carcass would arise the phoenix, the same bird, reborn anew. So the phoenix was this symbol of destruction and creation rolled into one. It was the symbol of rebirth. And in this sense, while it's terrible that Montague's had to burn his old life, there's the sense that now he's free. Now he's destroyed the past and can start over. Except there's still Beatty here, who tells him he's under arrest. "Montague, get out of there," said Faber. Montague listened. Beatty struck him a blow on the head and sent him reeling back. The green bullet in which Faber's voice whispered and cried fell to the sidewalk. Beatty snatched it up, grinning. He held it, half in, half out of his ear. Montag heard the distant voice crying, "Montag, you all right?" Beatty switched the green bullet off and thrust it in his pocket. "Well, so there's more here than I thought. I saw you tilt your head listening. First I thought you had a seashell, but when you turned clever later, I wondered. We'll trace this and drop in on your friend." "No," said Montag. He twitched the safety catch on the flamethrower. Beatty glanced instantly at Montag's fingers, and his eyes widened the faintest bit. Montag saw the surprise there, and himself glanced to his hands to see what they had done. Thinking back later, he could never decide whether the hands or Beatty's reaction to the hands gave him the final push towards murder. The last rolling thunder of avalanche stoned down about his ears, not touching him. So Beatty keeps pushing Montag. And he threatens Faber. He finds the green bullet that he's been using to communicate with Faber, and he threatens to track him down and find him. And this whole time, remember, Montag has the flamethrower in his hands. He's still holding the flamethrower. And as Beatty is continuing to hit Montag, literally hit Montag, and threaten Montag, Montag turns off the safety catch on the flamethrower. So we can do a little bit of guessing here where this is going to go, right? Usually when you take the safety catch off of something, that means you're about to use it. So he's considering using it. Right? This is the final push towards murder, using it specifically against Beatty. Because if Montag is truly going to be free, if he's truly going to destroy his past, he needs to destroy the person who is imprisoning him, who is keeping